Now we're going to look at one of the financial functions. It's on page 59 of the textbook. It's called the DB function, and DB stands for declining balance. And the example is in your chapter 2 data as p59 example DB function. So when you open that, you get what we have on the screen in front of us, and just the explanation about the DB function first. The DB function calculates the depreciation of an asset over a number of years using the declining balance method. The DB function requires 4 items of data, referred to as arguments, in order to calculate depreciation. These are as follows: purchase price or initial value of the asset, disposal value of the asset after the depreciation period, number of years over which to depreciate the asset, and year number. So example 4, calculating annual depreciation using the DB function. Table 2.24 demonstrates how the DB function calculates the depreciation on a company van over 5 years. The DB function is programmed to calculate higher values of depreciation in the earlier years, as this is when an asset loses most of its value. So in year 1 depreciation, if we click into B5, as always, probably the simplest way to deal with a function is to find it using the FX button, and the insert function dialog box comes up, and we type in DB because that's the function we want, and we click go, and some things come up. DB is the one we want, so we select it and we say OK. And the box that comes up has 5 fields actually, but there's only 4 of them that we need to worry about. So the first field is cost, the initial cost of the asset. In other words, what did you pay for it when you bought it? Or another way of phrasing that, the purchase price. And in this case, the purchase price is in E1. In the book, he has put that in absolute cell reference format. And that does make sense if you're going to copy the formula down to year 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. But when we do, we will have to make an adjustment for the year number, which we'll deal with in a moment. So I want the purchase price, which is an E1, and I want it to be absolute, so I want the dollar signs on it. So $E, $1. In the second field is the salvage value at the end of the life of the asset. In other words, when you're getting rid of this item, in this case company van, what do you think you're going to get for it? So they're calling that in this example the disposal value, and it's in E2. And again, I'd like the dollar signs on that. In the third field, it's looking for life. In other words, how long do you expect to have this item for? And that's in E3. And I'd like the dollar signs on that as well. Now, 4 says period. The period for which you want to calculate the depreciation. Period must use the same units as life. So if we're talking about the expected life in years, then we need to be looking at the depreciation per year. And year 1 is period number 1. So if we type in 1 there, so we say OK. Now, I could copy this down, and if I do, what's going to happen is that I'm going to have to go into each individual year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5 and change the year number to the correct year number. But it does save me having to do the depreciation function every single time. So I will click into that. I will copy it down for the other years. It's going to say the same amount every year because actually I haven't changed the year number yet. So if I go into the second one, and if I go into my FX button, I can see that I've got the right cost, I've got the right salvage, I've got the correct life, but I've got the wrong period because I've said 1 and we're now actually in year 2, so I'll put a 2 in there. And if I go to the next one, do the same and just change the year number to 3 because we're in year 3. Go to the next one. Go to the FX, change the period, in this case to 4. And finally, go to the FX, change the period number for the last one to 5. So that's the question actually done. What you'll notice is that when you depreciate using declining balance or the DB function, there's more depreciation in the first few years and less depreciation in the last few years. And that's because, for example, the amount of money you'd get for a van after 1 year and the amount of money you'd get for a van after 2 years would be quite different. But once the van gets old, the amount of money you would get for a 4-year-old van wouldn't be maybe that much different to the amount of money you'd get for a 5-year-old van. So it's a particular form of depreciation, and it's done in Excel using the DB function. And that's the end of that video.